Hi again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Wrestling Inc. Weekly. I'm Raj Giri of WrestlingINC.com, and joining me as always, he's a TV producer and writer and is a former WWE Creative executive as well as the founder of Major League Wrestling, Court Bauer. Court, how's it going?
Hey, man, what's up?
Quite a bit actually. It's been. Did you get a chance to watch the Royal Rumble?
I saw it. It was one of my favorite Royal Rumbles, probably since about 2003, so about 10 years. I mean, there's been some bad ones, but this one was definitely one of the better ones.
Yeah. I thought it was a really good Rumble as well. I thought, the main matches were definitely a little predictable.
Sure.
But I thought the surprises were great. The Rumble itself was a really good match. Rock and Punk I thought did good, and the undercard matches were good as well. With the Royal Rumble itself, do you think John Cena? You think that was the right way to go?
Yeah, I mean, you could have done a few different things. We talked about those things. I think at the end of the day, it's very hard as a promoter. Exceptionally hard to have a sure thing, especially in this day in wrestling. I know that sounds odd. Well, you control everything. Trust me, it's very hard to have a sure thing. So when you do have the chance to have a sure thing, you run for that sure thing and you hug it and you squeeze it. You just squeeze it until all the money is out of it. And that's what WWE is going to do, and they're going to do it up big in New York with Cena versus Rock. And hey, you throw Punk in there and make it a triple threat match. All right. Fine, I'm okay with that. It's a nice different twist on it. Maybe make it elimination style so it's not so lame. All right, but I don't think they're going to do that. What I do think is going to happen is you're going to have probably a record-setting gate in the Meadowlands come WrestleMania, and I think you'll have with such the price of tickets, the pay-per-view numbers. I think they're going to be so hot come WrestleMania, red, white, hot. And that's an old school term in the business. That means you're so hot, you can't get any hotter. And I think they're going to get there. I think by WrestleMania being in the number one market, arguably in the world, if not indeed the world, I think everything will reach a threshold where you're going to get to that point where you can't make any more money because you're making as much as you can on a pay-per-view. And I really do think they're going to hit that. And they're giving their customers value. And I mean, yeah, $60 if you're watching at home. But think about what you're going to get at WrestleMania. You're going to probably get Brock. Might get Undertaker. You're going to get Cena. You're going to get Punk. You're going to get The Rock. You're going to get a show that could be in the middle of a blizzard. You never know here in New York this time of the year. Or it could be a beautiful day. But it's going to be a unique setting. I mean, as a fan, I think this is a great move. And it's predictable, but that's not a bad thing in wrestling.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes the predictable thing is the best thing. Is the best thing for business. So, I definitely wasn't upset with Cena winning the Rumble. I felt like there are other creative things you can do, but I do think that Cena versus The Rock 2 is probably their biggest box office match that they have. With the exception of Rock versus Brock Lesnar, that's the only one I could see possibly getting more attention. But at the same time, I don't know if that match makes sense for the WWE title. And then with the main event, Rock versus CM Punk, what were your thoughts on that match?
I thought it was a great match. For a guy that's 40 years old, that has a lot of weight, a lot of muscle, I should say, on his body frame, and I guess he has good genetics. I don't know. Probably a little bit of some magic. Who knows? But anyway, I think that was a great match because a lot of those guys that are big, jacked up, especially when you're older and you're not regularly wrestling or active in that way in the ring, it's very hard to get a money main event match out of a guy like that. They usually disappoint and underwhelm. I think they did a great job. I saw some smoke and mirrors with some of the groundwork that Punk was doing. I thought it was good. I thought that it was, like I've talked about in the past, there's a time and place to interject with physicality by Paul Heyman, and we saw that moment, and I thought it was a great moment because things escalated the following night for Paul Heyman and the accountability factor with Vince McMahon. And I thought the match was great. And then the finish, I know people went nuts because Punk was beat. That didn't bother me. I have no problem with Punk being – he was honestly – he comes out of this show with more people talking about him, more passionate about him than ever. Maybe the Money in the Bank you can say that he was maybe a little hotter. Maybe. Point is, this match made him bigger. I don't care if he lost, won. I don't care if it was shitty book or not. The end result is he was a bigger star. And that's part of being in this business. That's what investing in The Rock is about, making guys get over, or getting guys over and making them bigger. And Punk lived up to his end of the bargain, and I didn't like the convoluted finish with the match being stopped and then restarted by the chairman. I think that actually hurt The Rock in his outsider Hollywood thing, and that's not some card they're playing this year. And then to have the old man come out and kind of say, okay, we're going to do this. But then Rock tried to cover it, saying, no, I'm going to win it myself. I just think they could have stopped it, and then the ref could have just said the match must continue or something. But, you know, I get obviously looking back, they were planting the seeds for the angle the following night with Vince and getting involved again. But, you know, the WWE has a problem with how people perceive The Rock, and it's really honestly the 10% probably listening to this show, but you know it's the smaller internet audience that's very vocal, and 10 times as vocal probably as the casual fan sometimes, and the last year or two, Rock has been portrayed as a guy that's an outsider by John Cena. That wasn't there, you know, paying his dues 250 days a year or whatever, like Cena. And you know, once that seed was planted in everyone's brain last year, now with Punk and the long reign and people having such such feelings for the guy, it kind of backfired. And I look now also at this, and I think, you know, it's interesting because if John Cena was doing this match and having this 400-day title reign, and was facing The Rock, would anyone be saying the same thing? I doubt it.
Yeah, and I agree with you that it's really the internet crowd that was upset with the ending. I mean, the crowd popped huge for The Rock's win. You know, the live audience was definitely happy with the title change, and people are assuming like this is it for Punk or something. You know, he's probably got many more title reigns ahead of him. So it's definitely not the end by any means. But I agree. I thought Punk came out a bigger star with this whole feud and with the match, and it definitely helps him going forward. He's not going to get the top spot at WrestleMania, which I know is a big deal for him, and
right, but
one of his remaining goals.
But if you take a step back again, and let's have perspective like we do now a little bit about the Royal Rumble finish, which led to Brock and everything, I think if you look forward to maybe WrestleMania 30, maybe WrestleMania 32, we don't know, but there is a time and place where Steve Austin comes in and The Rock steps out because he's going to have more commitments and circumstances being what they are. I don't think this will be a regular annual thing with The Rock. Maybe it will be, but I doubt it. But Steve Austin, he's talked about it. He probably wants to do something. And I think there's not a greater dynamic than Austin versus CM Punk, straight edge versus the Stone Cold 316 beer guzzling machine. And I think that's obviously it plays off and stuff so easily. I mean, the characters you just see those promos, and I think that's the kind of match that Austin can work. He'd feel safe working a match with Punk. Even though Punk has blown a spot or two in his day, but I don't think he's ever really hurt anyone in the process, just himself. But I think that's a match we could see, and then you freshen it up. And, of course, Steve Austin knows not to share the spotlight with anyone, and he'll know when it's time and when the opportunity is there. But he's also, creeping towards 50, and as you creep towards 50, you want to make sure – you can do that stuff at 50, but he doesn't want to go out looking like a has-been, and he's very conscious of that. So I think on the horizon, it might be longer than shorter, but we'll see. There's a great opportunity, another brass ring for CM Punk to grab, in addition to doing stuff with Brock Lesnar, The Undertaker. So I really believe this is kind of the first phase of really seeing CM Punk as a legitimate main eventer in the eyes of Vince McMahon in the office. Not me, not someone else, but in their eyes, where they're gonna rub them up against everyone. Because once you enter this cycle of talent, the upper echelon talent, you stick there more or less. So I think that's where he's staying. And so good things are on the horizon for Punk. I don't think the guy's hanging his head and depressed today, and neither should you. There's a lot of good stuff ahead. And I have more confidence right now in the WWE and their product and where they're going than I did 2 years ago or even maybe 12 months ago. And I don't know if that's the adjustments they've made with creative and getting rid of Brian Gewirtz, who I really didn't think was providing much to the department at that point, or just Hunter stepping in and having more hands-on, and that's probably a good part of it because he has more influence than anyone would. But maybe it's a series of events, a combination of things, and so on. But I'm very happy with where the product is going, and I think it's going to be interesting to see where they head on the road to WrestleMania.
Yeah, and speaking of the road to WrestleMania, the Raw the night after the Royal Rumble is pretty much the, I guess you could call it the official start of the road to WrestleMania. And you got, and you had the Raw Roulette, which I think just led to some horrendous segments. And I thought Monday's Raw was pretty horrendous up until the end. Outside of the stuff with Rock and CM Punk, I thought CM Punk was fantastic. And Damien Sandow and Sheamus, they had a strong match. But other than that, I thought it was one of those shows that was just terrible until the end. And I thought and you expected Brock. I think a lot of people expected Brock Lesnar to come out, but it still was awesome that the way that they did it, as long as you suspended disbelief and didn't look at all the plot holes in the angle throughout the night. But I thought the ending made the show, and but other than that, I thought it was kind of a wasted opportunity for a night when you're going to have high viewership. What were your thoughts on Monday's show?
It felt like a marathon. Felt like you were going through a very long show. And if you got to that last few minutes, you're 170 minutes in, and you made it to almost, you can see the finish line. You got one hell of a finish. But there was a lot of ugly, a lot of bad, a lot of opportunity to switch the channel. But there was no competition, and that's where I found myself. I really didn't want to watch the show, but there really wasn't anything on, and nothing, for me that really was sparking my interest. So kind of out of just indifference, I stayed on with the show. And, I didn't think there was a lot of great to it, but sometimes train wrecks rate very well. Maybe the Khali thing, I haven't looked at the numbers, and I really don't. But I would imagine sometime, I know for a fact, train wrecks, as we all know, rate well. And so I don't know if the Khali sing-along rated well, or maybe it didn't. Maybe the other train wreck with the dance thing with Brutus and so on, maybe that did okay. I don't know. But sometimes that stuff works better than it should. I don't know why, but it does. And maybe everyone's like, can you believe how bad it's gotten? And everyone's just talking about it, and you still want to see what's going to happen next. I don't know, but the show was like, it really felt like it was creative fatigue, and then you had this massive angle at the end that, you look at all the people involved in that angle, and I thought it was a great way to reintroduce Brock. There was a motive for him to be there. There was a motive for him to attack who he attacked, which sets up the motive for Hunter to come out of retirement, which sets up everything in play, because it's like basically Brock left and he had done all he wanted to do as a mercenary and got out. And now he needed to help his associate Heyman out of a bind, and here you go. It made a lot of sense. And for Vince, it made sense that he was involved the last week or two on TV, and now here he was, because he's kind of the MacGuffin in a TV film, using TV film verbiage. That's basically he was the device to get you to connect Hunter and Brock and have them set up everything for WrestleMania. The weird thing for me is, I don't know how much sympathy Vince had when he took that F5. Now, there's times when Vince can be a sympathetic kind of guy, and then he hasn't. I haven't thought much of his performance the last few weeks. I felt like he's deteriorated in terms of as a performer, and physically he's looking pretty bad, which concerns me. You never want to see a guy like that looking that bad. But he's usually one of the best performers, and he, in fact, to me was, he seemed kind of lost in his train of thought during promos, the live promo with Heyman and Punk last week, and he just doesn't look good. He doesn't look like himself, and he did much better with Paul on Monday night. But yeah, we'll see where this goes. I think that was a great angle, and you definitely have a lot of good options and interesting stories going forward.
Yeah, and Vince McMahon legitimately got injured during taking that bump from Brock Lesnar, and he's going to have surgery on his left hip. So just got to wonder how much more physical stuff Vince can do, with his age and getting up there, and just having been around for a long time.
Oh, really? He's injured? I haven't heard that.
Well, I guess he's had a bad hip. And I think it sounds like the Lesnar bump kind of made it worse, so he's going to have surgery on it.
Wow.
But I thought the angle was good. The whole Heyman firing thing, actually doesn't make sense in a lot of ways, and that whole backstage footage with him talking with the Shield and leaving the cameraman there, I thought was cheesy. But the end result was fine. But then again, they've changed plans for Brock Lesnar a lot of times going into WrestleMania. And I was kind of hoping they wouldn't go with Hunter versus Lesnar, that they changed their plans again, and it looks like they are going to go through with that. And so you're seeing a lot of, and it looks like they're going with Jericho and Ziggler. I'm not sure if it'll go all the way to WrestleMania or they finished that program before, but a lot of the programs are kind of stuff you already saw last year heading into this year's WrestleMania.
Right. There is some interesting parallels to last year. I also think that I suspect they might go Sin Cara Ray again, which they didn't do last year, but something that's been on and off and on and off. But based on what I've been hearing, that actually now might be back in the mix, but I think that could change every day. I think there will be some twists and turns, some stipulations thrown in. WWE isn't they're not going to just regurgitate the same matches as they've done in the past. They will put twists on. They will put in special referees, things like that.
Mm-hmm. And if they do go with Ray and Sin Cara, which is how it looks like they might be going. They beat Team Hell No on this week's SmackDown. They'll be airing Friday. It'll be a rush program as opposed to and you can't really blame them. I mean, both of them have had injuries and have had to take time off. But it's almost like if you almost got to wonder if they should maybe just solidify them as a tag team before having them feud and maybe hold off for a while, maybe until SummerSlam or next year's WrestleMania.
Yeah, it feels like they really maybe you could do it at SummerSlam, but just the reality is, Ray's body is betraying him. He put a lot of muscle on that body frame about 10 years ago when he came to WWE or was finally offered a contract. And going into that, he already was having pretty nasty knee problems. And, in fact, I had heard from Dave Meltzer in the late 90s and Conan that Ray was his knees were pretty thrashed. So, a lot of miles on those knees and a lot of bumps on that card. And so you can see the guys. He's not the guy that we all kind of saw and enjoyed and discovered in the mid-'90s. Some of us that were alive then, and it's pretty crazy when you look at the guy now, and he certainly does not look like the same Ray in a lot of ways in the ring and physically. And Sin Cara, he's not the guy that I was touting in '06 like a lot of people. In fact, that's when I first tried to pitch him to WWE. He was going to be part of a kind of a rebooted cruiserweight division. And long story short, he was just doing so much money in Mexico, and WWE didn't quite get what it would take financially to get him to come in. They thought he'd be much more affordable than what he turned out to be, but he was on fire down there. And if you watch Mystico, Sin Cara's name down in Mexico, watch him, put in CMLL, put in 2006 or something on YouTube, and watch him. He's a much different guy. He's much faster. He's much crazier. The guy you see here is toned down. He's had some catastrophic injuries to his wheels, and that takes its effects. It has an effect on these guys. So the match isn't what I just don't know what that match is. I don't know if it's a really good match either, given where they are physically.
Yeah. And also with that at WrestleMania with CM Punk, it had been rumored that he'd be facing The Undertaker. Now there's some doubts as to whether Undertaker can even wrestle on the card with his just his physical well-being and the shape he's in. If Undertaker's not able to make the show, what do you do with CM Punk?
Well, you could enter him, like I said, in that three-way, do a triple threat. That's an interesting option. There's not a lot of great options that are going to be available to you because you're not going to be able to get Steve Austin. He's just not going to be available to you for this event. You could always do something with some of the other guys. I mean, you have, Del Rio, you have Ryback, you have Big Show, you have none of this is inspiring. I know none of this is lighting your world on fire. And you have Randy Orton. And sometimes you really don't have a great option if something like the Undertaker scenario is unavailable to you. And what you look at, so you look at the ones where, okay, we get him a good win on the show and then just kind of in a holding pattern until after WrestleMania. I know that doesn't really blow everyone's mind, but sometimes that's how it is. Other times you can do something where you do a stunt match where you bring in an outside presence, and I'm against that because I believe talent deserves that WrestleMania payday more than an outsider, and they already have enough outsiders, so to speak. So they're pretty stacked on ends, but in the past it's like Big Show versus Akibono or something crazy like that. And this WrestleMania, I don't know what you would do with Punk. And I don't have the roster in front of me, but it's like you could do Mick Foley and do a little short and sweet something. But again, he's not a regular guy on the roster. I mean, he could do something with Ric Flair, but I'm very uncomfortable seeing Ric Flair take bumps. And obviously, he's got a serious medical situation that we really don't have much clarity on right now with his blood clot and stuff. And I think it would be a catastrophe waiting to give the green light to get him to go in the ring again. So it's hard to say really. I don't see that obvious match there. Of course you could ring up Shawn Michaels and do Shawn versus Punk. I would love to see it, but I think that's too premature, and I think that's again not a great timing thing. I'd rather see Shawn Michaels return on the flip side. Now I don't know if Shawn Michaels will return, if at all, ever. But I mean, I think that you need something for the flip side of WrestleMania, like you had last year with Brock. You don't want that WrestleMania hangover. It's something we always would fight. And your options are limited, but I'd like to see, maybe Shawn Michaels comes in and it's Punk versus Michaels for a few months. I think that would be a fine program.
Yeah, and with Alberto Del Rio, what would you do with him? I think there's a few options. It's been talked about that Sheamus will end up facing Randy Orton at WrestleMania for the world title, but Del Rio, seems to be picking up a little steam.
Yeah, I guess.
And if he is, I could see those plans easily changing.
I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to see the world title and the WWE title unified as soon as possible. I just think it's time, but I don't know. I think that's one of those moves that's just going to it could happen randomly and happen on a Raw one night, and that's it. I don't know if it's something that's going to be a long building. Just because Vince, I think, will impulsively decide he's sick of it and wants to go to completely different direction as soon as possible. Del Rio's a weird guy because his babyface turn really was like just happened out of the blue. There was no motive behind it. There was no instant guy to really go after in a weird way. It felt very odd and kind of isolated for a turn. I think, and then he kind of turned back with the Santa Claus thing. So I think he's got to. Del Rio's interesting. The Rumble thing was. They're making Rodriguez like this childlike guy fan or something, the inner fan that maybe they're projecting there. But I don't see Del Rio as I don't think he's there, man. I really don't. I'm a big fan of his, but I just don't feel like right now I feel him. And I think they've really the way they've put the Speedy Gonzalez Mexican national vibe on him, I think, has been really bad and in bad taste, and I don't think that look at that and contrast it with how UFC got over Cain Velasquez and telling the immigrant farmer's father story and telling a story that's relatable. I mean, it's night and day, and so I think you could have told a great story and had a great narrative with Del Rio, but. Because his real story is really fat. He's second-generation wrestler, nephew of Mil Mascaras, and great background in amateur wrestling and MMA. It's like I think there's a real obvious way to position this guy as a cool, your champ kind of thing. But I don't know. He's very cartoonish. His manager is actually much more entertaining of the duo in a lot of ways. I don't know where you do with him. I don't know what you do with Del Rio at WrestleMania. I think he's going to be in the Daniel Bryan Sheamus spot from last year. He does not that quick of a match, but a rather brief match, and off into a different direction they go. Yeah,
and on to TNA. They made a couple of big announcements over the past couple of weeks. One is expected to happen tonight. First, they cut down on the number of pay-per-views they're doing from 12 to 4 major ones, and then they'll have these other specials filling in on the months where they don't have a major pay-per-view. And then tonight they're expected to announce that they'll be taking Impact Wrestling on the road. So they'll still be filming some episodes from the Impact Zone, but you'll see a lot more from different arenas, both which I think are much needed improvements for a company that had been stale for a long time. I think it adds a little freshness, and it's kind of long overdue in my opinion. I kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think they're all good moves, but to announce it on a TV show to millions of people or a million people, whatever their numbers are, very low numbers, but whatever they are, I think it just speaks to how in the bubble they are and how they are desperate to look like they're something, but in the way they're doing it makes them look so super Bush League because it shines a spotlight on the fact that they don't do shit. They've been at the same place for a million years, and to the average fan, they're going to shrug. Not you and me, but the average fan. They're going to shrug like, who gives a damn? Okay, great. You're going to be in Alabama next week. Who cares? They just want to them a big announcement is, you signed Steve Austin, you signed The Rock, you signed Wrestler X, or you're bringing in this, or you're bringing in War Games, or you're bringing in Elimination Chamber, you're bringing in Tito Ortiz and Brock Lesnar, or. But when you just see you're just going on the freaking road with your TV, I remember when Raw they just did it. They didn't say anything. The next week they went from Manhattan Center to different locations, whether it was in Poughkeepsie, New York, or in Bushkill, Pennsylvania, or in Boston, Massachusetts. That was it. They didn't say, we're going on the road, because it sounds stupid.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good
true
point.
that it's a good strategy, but in terms of how you market your product and look like you position yourself as a brand, which they're terrible at doing, position yourself as a brand, as a national company, that looks preposterous. It's not like ECW where they were this little engine that could, and they went from a regional outlet in Philly to a larger stage at the regional TV, sports network level to then TNN or whatever it was called, Nashville Network, and say now we're going to be touring this and this, and you've made it possible. And these guys are owned by a freaking billion-dollar energy company, and Spike is behind them, and they're just saying they're going on the road. It's preposterous, and to me makes them look like the fools they are.
Well, fair enough. And kind of
I'm trying.
moving on.
I'm being politically correct. I'm just trying to get a job. Trying to get a job
right.
somewhere.
All right. Yeah. Tell us how you really feel. But yeah, moving on to the UFC. You got a loaded UFC card this weekend. This is really from you look at the main card. Every fight on the main card is looks like it could be fantastic, and the prelims on FX is a strong card too. I wanted to get your picks for the top fights. You got Alistair Overeem returning to face Antonio Bigfoot Silva. Overeem was supposed to get a title shot last year in May, but had some issues with the drug testing. How do you see this fight going? Overeem's kind of coming off a big layoff. His last fight was the victory over Brock Lesnar, so he might have some cage rust, but we'll have to see how that goes.
That's the big factor for me is cage rust. Is this a situation where he's going to be able to go through there and just demolish someone, or is it going to be his time? And he's sometimes a fighter just gets old overnight, and his timing's off. He looks timid, or he just takes a punch and his punch card is full like a bum card, and he just like Chuck Liddell. That's it. I don't know. You don't know. You look at these fights, and some of them, when the guys come back, they're better than ever, and you actually wonder how that's possible. And sometimes it's again due to magic, quote unquote magic. But I don't know. My picks for the show, I would say I'm rooting or hoping for Jose Aldo. I would like to. I think Aldo's amazing. I think Nogueira Evans. Yeah, I think he'll beat Edgar. Evans and Nogueira, I'm going to go with Nogueira. I really think that's a fight that Evans probably will win, but I don't know. I think I'm rooting for Nogueira. And Alistair Overeem and Antonio Silva, like I said, it's like, is there cage rust? Is this this guy's been off for so long? At what point does it all? But Silva, he should beat Silva. I think he should beat Silva. But I've seen Silva get crazy. Bigfoot is no slouch in a lot of ways. I've seen him do some impressive stuff in there. So I'm going to go with Alistair. But you never know. I think Fitch versus Maia, I don't know. I'm not a fan of either fighter at this point. They both sometimes will intrigue me, but at the same time, I can get very bored by their fights. And that's one of those fights that I'm just praying that, like, Maia somehow just gets an early, choke, and beats him. But this could be a long one, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not a big fan of either, so.
Yeah. I see Fitch taking that one. It's probably not going to be pretty. Fitch, his last fight with Eric Silva was good, but that's
right.
And when he got knocked out with Johnny Hendricks, that was exciting. But usually his,
I love that. Yes, if he goes in there and takes a good punch and bumps for us, that'd be terrific. I'll take that. But when you get those long, plodding fights. And here on the East Coast, you get these fights, and then that's probably going to be the second fight of the night, in the order. Maybe the match order, but that's the point of the night. You got your friends over, you're in your man cave, whatever, and you're sitting there watching that. On the East Coast, that's about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and boy, it gets quiet in the room, and it gets a little quieter, and your eyes start to sink, and everyone's getting a little tired, and you realize first of all you're getting older, but second of all, this fight is super boring, and nothing, no beer, no anything is going to get you back into this fight at this point. Because I've seen so many Fish fights where it just sucks the energy out of a room, a party, or whatever, or an arena sometimes. And I respect a lot of what he does out there, but at the same time, it can be it feels like a cure for insomnia sometimes. And Maia, is a guy that, when he does, I like seeing his ground game. It's a fascinating thing, and he's improved in terms of being an entertaining fighter. But I've also seen fights of his where I'm just like a zombie watching it and just can't take any more of him. And he's not. I've seen fights where he's not aggressive. He's super kind of wait and see. He tries the stand-up thing, and I hate seeing him do his stand-up. I'm not a fan of either guy, so I'm going to say only negative things. That's my deal with these two.
Yeah, and I agree with your pick for Evans, Nogueira. As for Aldo and Edgar, I wouldn't be surprised to see Edgar pull it off. Fighters like Edgar with that kind of speed, can give Aldo trouble. Mark Hominick, of all people, gave Aldo trouble a couple of years ago when they were in Canada. So that's one fight where I'm kind of predicting an upset. I'm kind of predicting Edgar to take it, but your other picks, I'm pretty much there with you. I kind of agree with the rest.
Yeah. No, and we'll see. It's a good card. I think they have the makings of a great main event, and we'll see what Alistair Overeem. This is going to be a really interesting one. If he can win this fight, it'll set up some interesting things that I think UFC heavyweight division needs right now. So, absolutely.
And well, thanks again, Court. Appreciate it as always. And what's going on over at MLW?
MLW, we got a new Conan. We got a new show with Conan, myself, and St. Laurent dropping this Sunday, where we will talk about bath salts and Conan, his experiences experimenting with them with other wrestlers that you may very well be aware of, including a member of DX and a member of the Hart family. So it's a crazy episode. We also address some issues that are going on with Conan and Nash to this very day, where they all started back in the WCW days. We take mailbag questions from everyone out there, so check it out. It'll be a fun show. It's always a crazy show. It's about 90 minutes in length. It's free. MLW.com is where you can hit that. Or you can go on iTunes and search MLW Radio, or you go to MajorLeagueWrestling.com or MLW.com. You can find us on Stitcher, too.
Well, great. We'll make sure to check that out. And that does it for this week. Thanks, everyone, for